Okay, this is our second video that we're putting up on the subject of Islam. The, the first presentation that we did focused on the early beginnings of Islam. We looked at the story of the Prophet, of Muhammad, how he began to have his revelations, and then the struggles that he had in sharing his teaching with other people at the time, and eventually of the success that he experienced prior to his death, when his version of Islam basically became the dominant religion in the Arab Peninsula, and then rapidly spread to other parts of the world. In this video, we want to look more at what's going on in contemporary Islam, so that it's going to include some consideration of the sacred text for Islam, which is the Qur'an, and the difficulty that Westerners have in gaining access to that text. And then we're going to look at the five pillars, five basic things that Muslims are supposed to try to live by. And then finally, we'll finish up by taking a look at the different divisions within Islam. That would be the Sunnis and the Shiites, and then the Sufis as well. I've included on this first slide a picture of a mosque, and this is a famous mosque, so not all Islamic mosques would be as grand as this. But this is the Blue Mosque, which is in Istanbul. And all of the mosques would be somewhat similar. I mean, the main structure would be domed, such as this one is, and it would include a number of these tall pencil-like structures called minarets. And I don't know, it could be 4 or 5 minarets in the larger mosque. The Islamic Muslim architecture can be quite beautiful. But let's look at these other items. Here I've included an image of some Arabic calligraphy, and this particular image does have religious significance. It's an expression of the Shahada, which is a statement of belief for Muslims. I can't verify what it says since I can't read it, but I can see the quality or the aesthetic quality of this type of calligraphy, which is pretty common in the Arabic world. The kind of beauty of the script that is used. We'll see what the Shahada will be explained very shortly. In our previous video, we talked about how the circumstances within which Muhammad received the Quran. And just again, the Quran is the primary sacred text within Islam. It was supposedly revealed to Muhammad by the Archangel Gabriel, and he transmitted what he received to his followers, his companions, and so he memorized it and then passed it on, and his followers wrote it down. It seems clear that Muhammad was not literate, but others sort of wrote down what he told them. The Quran is you can find translations of it, but Muslims prefer that the text
remain in the language within which it was received, Arabic. And like all the prayers and rituals and so forth are also spoken in the Arabic language. So there's a feeling that it shouldn't be translated and that it loses something in translation. Generally, when it is read by Muslims, it's read literally. The language, the Arabic language, is an obstacle, if not a barrier, to Westerners, especially to outsiders. It's a difficult language, to learn. One can study it and become proficient in it. But in some respects, it's I'm referring to the Quran now, that it's impenetrable and maybe untranslatable. And you would ask why, what in it makes it sort of difficult to translate if the language within which it's written, has an emotional quality, or contains a fervor and a mystery of the Arabic language. That's hard to capture and translate into another language. In this regard, the Quran's, I think, different from Christian Bible, for Christians anyhow. And the Christian Bible, which is widely translated. It's not unique for a religion to want to keep the sacred text in the original language. That's the case in Judaism as well, where it's expected that people learn how to speak Hebrew, and that the Torah is written in Hebrew. Aside from the language problem, the content of the Quran is different from what Westerners are familiar with. And you say the Quran, it's not written, it's not a history in the same way as we said that the Hebrew scriptures were a history. And clearly God is not revealed in any human form in the Quran. The way God appeared in the Gospels, in Jesus, or in the Bhagavad Gita with Krishna. And in general, you could say that the Quran, and this I'm taking from Houston Smith's comments as well, that the Quran is more doctrinal than it is historical. You say the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, and not all the books, but most of them are historical. They tell the story, more so than they are doctrinal, telling you what the practices should be. The primary thrust of the Quran is to proclaim the unity, the omnipotence, the omniscience, and the mercy of God, and also the total dependence of human beings on God as well. In the Quran, Muslims believe that God is speaking directly to them. God speaks in the first person. A second sacred text, viewed as sacred, is not equivalent to the Quran, but it's a secondary text, but one that is highly valued by Muslims, and that's the Sunnah. The Sunnah is sometimes referred to as the Hadith, and it's a collection of stories or reports about Muhammad, sometimes about his companions, about the way he lived his life and what his characteristics were and so forth. And these stories are believed to provide a positive or a good example for people to try and emulate. So it's the Sunnah it's not contained in the Quran, but it was kind of firsthand reports as to how Muhammad lived his life, and it's viewed as a good guide for how Muslims should live their lives. So we see in a number of religious teachings that the effectiveness and the appeal of the teaching is aided if it's clear what's expected of followers. You'd say we definitely saw that in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Things were spelled out pretty clearly for what you needed to do to follow the way of the Buddha. We saw it again in Confucianism, where there were the 5 ideals or principles that Confucius recommended for people to try to make use of, and now we see it in Islam as well, the 5 pillars of Islam. This is a list of what are the primary expectations of an individual person who's trying to be a good Muslim. And the directions, you follow these directions, you're trying to walk in the straight way, on the straight path. This, the simplicity of this, I don't overstate it, but would add to its attractiveness and might explain to some extent how Islam was able to spread so rapidly and so widely. The first pillar is the confession of faith, the Shahada, and this is a statement of belief. We just recently finished up Christianity, where we had the creeds, the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed. Here it's a much simpler statement that a Muslim is expected to say, and here it says it should be recited at least once in a person's lifetime with full understanding. And you'd say that's maybe essentially what's needed, but in reality it's cited on a daily basis by any practicing Muslim. This creed is quite simple. I've included a transliteration of the Arabic. I'm not going to try and say it because I can't. But the translation is that there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. The second pillar is prayer, salah, and prayers are always supposed to be directed towards Mecca, and they serve as a kind of reminder at different times of the day of our relationship with God, and they help keep life in perspective if you find a way to follow this regimen. So the 5 times a day are, I don't know the precise hours for these, but when you wake up, upon rising, at noon, when the sun's at its highest, at mid-decline, halfway between noon and sunset, at sunset, and then before retiring. If you ever have the experience of visiting a city in a Muslim country, I mean a large city, you would hear the calls to prayer. and you would hear them from every mosque that might be within sound reach of where you are. So, and the call would come from, I think the caller is referred to as a muezzin, and the call would come from a minaret. So these very tall, thin towers that surround mosque. There's usually at least 4, maybe 5 of them, and so forth. And it's even if you don't pray, I mean, you're reminded that in that environment that you're called to it. It's not like everybody in the street stops and kneels down to do their prayers, but people would be reminded, and if they wish, they could go into a part of their home and do their prayers. Well, the first 2 pillars, the Shahada and the Salah, are not unique to Islam. I mean, that's prayers and some statement of faith. Seems to be a part of every religion. And this third one, charity, is also part of all the religions that we're familiar with. And that's trying to take care of those in society who don't have, who are less fortunate, taking care of the poor. In Islam, the charity is referred to as zakat, and your followers are expected to give to those who are less fortunate than themselves, if you're able to. And the recommendation is 2.5% of all that one has should be given to the poor. And that doesn't mean, like in Christianity, people tithe, and it's supposed to be 10%. So this sounds like a small number, but the 2.5% is supposed to go directly to the poor. It's not for building a new church or a new mosque or anything like that. So that's the third pillar. The fourth pillar is unique to Islam, and that's known as Ramadan. So this is a month, once a year, there is a month where observant Muslims, are expected for that month to fast. And that means during the daylight hours, at least, no food or no drink. When dark comes, you can eat a little bit and you can drink, but it's supposed to be moderate. And this month of observation is to commemorate the month when Muhammad received his first revelations, and also the month 10 years later when he and his followers migrated to Medina, the Hijrah. This month is based on the lunar calendar, which is followed in Islam, and because of that, it means the month is not at the same month as the rest of the world would recognize every year. So it would shift a little bit. So it wouldn't always be at the same time during the year. I wanted to add one more thing to the previous slide, which is that at the end of the month of Ramadan, there's always a big feast given. So people are at that point free to indulge, and they do. The last pillar is pilgrimage to Mecca, and saying pilgrimage is practiced in a lot of different religions. It's one of the ways of observing your religion or doing something for the sake of your religion. You make a pilgrimage to some holy site or some place that's viewed as special within the practice of your religion. In Islam, it's pilgrimage to Mecca, where the originated, and it's called the Hajj. And that's in Saudi Arabia. So it's a bit of a journey. A recommendation is that at least once in your lifetime, if you're able to afford it, you should make the Hajj. And it's the point is to heighten one's devotion to God and the revelations that he gave to Muhammad. So this is, I mean, if you look at any of the pictures or the videos of what the Hajj is like, it's a pretty amazing experience. You get a few million people sort of coming together to at a certain time of the year. I mean, into Saudi Arabia for this special pillar, I guess. Two of the observations that are made by people is that are reinforced by this experience of going on the Hajj is one, it provides an experience of human equality. Everybody, when they come, there's a traditional kind of garb, a very simple outfit that people wear. Middle Eastern style is just like a couple of white items of clothing that you wrap around yourself and so forth. So everybody looks pretty much like they're dressed the same, and you wouldn't be able to tell by the way people dress whether they're rich or poor or what their status is in ordinary society. So everybody's equal. The second thing is that people have been impressed by the experience of going on the Hajj and seeing how many different kinds of peoples, different races are represented. So it gives the impression of not only egalitarianism but also universality. So that's a part of the special experience. And one woman in a video said when she went for the first time on her pilgrimage to Mecca that she wept when she got there because she felt like she'd gone home. It's like going to the house of God. In the center of Mecca is the Kaaba, and that's the structure that the legend has it that Abraham and Ishmael constructed, a kind of simple block stone structure which was dedicated to God at the very beginning. So that's sort of people walk around that in huge masses. I wanted to comment a little bit on the major divisions in Islam. So, as we said previously, that's the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Sufis. On this slide, we're going to talk about the Sunnis and the Shiites. The Sunnis, I have the least amount of text devoted to them, but that doesn't reflect their numbers. So the Sunnis really make up the vast majority of Muslims. 87% of all Muslims are Sunnis. Simply, you could say they're traditionalist. And what sets them apart from the Shiites is that they believe that the rulers of the Islam should be chosen from the people or from the tribe or from the community of followers. I like the comment here. I mean, we get the impression that Islam is a religion that is just located in the Middle East, but I think the vast majority of Muslims are not really from the Middle East, but from Southeast Asia. So there are many countries where there's large Muslim populations that sort of are larger than those found in Middle Eastern countries. The second division of Islam, or say, are the Shiites. And this is a division between the Sunnis and the Shiites that formed very early on, even after the death of Muhammad. there was controversy as who should be the leader of the religion after Muhammad was gone. The Sunnis argued that the community should make that decision and that they would choose whom they thought was best for the job. The Shiites really felt that the next leader of Islam after Muhammad should be somebody who was a blood relative of Muhammad. I suppose that's a kind of tribal way of thinking about things, but it didn't carry the day early on. So the Sunnis, the traditionalists, were able to name the subsequent rulers. The Shiites had one candidate in particular that they advocated, and that was Ali, who was Muhammad's son-in-law at the time. So apparently he was passed over 3 times, and then before he did become the successor, but he didn't last in his position very long. He was assassinated, and actually all the members of his family were killed when he was assassinated. They said, number almost 70 people, men, women, and children. So it was kind of massacre. And the Shiites have never gotten over that and continued to commemorate that tragic event. And so it's a source of contention between the Sunnis and the Shiites. In general, the Shiites are a more conservative type of religious group. And then, Sunnis are also traditionalists, so I won't say that, but Shiites will tend to think that the leaders of their community should be religious people from imams. I think the majority of Shiites, as is pointed out here at the end, live in Iraq and Iran. So, in Iraq we had in Iran we had the Ayatollahs. That's like a religious figure, but also a political figure as well. That's more in keeping with the Shiite set of beliefs. The last group is really the smallest, and in spite of the fact that I've got a lot more written about them, because in a way they seem more interesting from a Western, maybe from a philosophical point of view. The Sufis are, and also because they're more open to the West, I would say. So you'd say the Sufis were Islamic mystics and a contemplative school of Islam that sought to develop individual consciousness of God through different kinds of practices, chanting, recitations of God's names, it's called dhikrs, I think, music and physical movements. A lot of people have seen have some idea of the whirling dervishes, for instance, would be included within the Sufi population, although that's not all groups of Sufis would whirl like the dervishes do. They would have, their own kinds of ways of doing something similar. So they sought a deeper understanding. In a way, you could say they were less worldly, more spiritual in their focus and interest, more pure religiously, and clearly less political, which distinguishes them significantly from the Sunnis and the Shiites. Theirs is can be said, to be a way of the heart. A focus on love is common in their thinking, in their poetry. Say, for example, in the Persian poet Rumi, Sufis are more likely to view the Qur'an metaphorically instead of reading it literally, as is recommended by most Muslims. So for the Sufis, it's more text to be interpreted. And as I said before, Sufism is more open to other religions, can have more communication with them in a way. They're more interested in the spirit of the teaching and in adherence to the outer form of the teaching. As a result of their views, they're often not recognized as true Muslims, very much, at least by the Sunnis or the Shiites.
Here I've included one last image of dervishes whirling. This is from some time in history back, but it gives you the general idea. I wanted to include one more thing about the Sufis. I've long been interested in them, and you get a sense of Islamic religion from reading Rumi's poetry and reading Sufi stories, a sense of the spirituality contained within Islamic teachings that you don't get from what you hear Sunnis and Shiites have to say about the religion. So I'm appreciative of that, and sometimes it takes an interpretation of a religion which is more open so that you can get a better sense of what it really is. Anyhow, we'll finish with that. Thank you.